Now, if you follow the calendar closely, now this is one of the hottest period for China. And guess what? Because 1.3 billion people right now are actually celebrating the Lunar New Year. And again, this is one of the exciting moments for the country. We're able to fly back or take the train back to the hometowns to be united with the families. And also, this is the moment that we're able to talk about everything. I mean, everything from family matters to the issues around China and perhaps even around international topics. Well, speaking of international topics, and surely during the Chinese New Year, no one would like to receive some bad news, especially after looking at the social media. Well, but US President Donald Trump doesn't really care about that. Now, why is that? Because he just carefully placed tariffs upon Chinese goods or Chinese commodities. I'm sure that if you're watching this as a Chinese national and your first thought was, well, that's Donald Trump and he's crazy. He can do anything he wants. Well, maybe for the first term and not for the second term. But this time, now the Chinese officials or government officials reacted strongly and heavily criticized Donald Trump's behavior and believe this is not a good way to be united as a president. And also, this is not a good way to send a strong and positive message, especially to the Chinese government. But meanwhile, domestically speaking, that if you're familiar with a person called Kim Martin just officially accepted the position to be the new chairman for the DNC. Now, according to the source, that Kim Martin believed that he is the right person to shoulder much greater responsibilities for the future Democratic Party. Can we really believe in that? And last but not least, what do we know about the relationship between US and China putting everything together? Remember, the Chinese younger generations today are no longer just watching the news on TV, they're on social media. And as a matter of fact, even though Facebook, Twitter, or X, all other medias are not quite open to China, but the younger generations are still discovering ways to stay connected with the world. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished speaker, who is the Dr. Michael Patrick. Again, if you're familiar with our show, and Dr. Patrick has been around our show for decades, and he's well known for his international experiences, especially covering political debates and presidential campaigns. And of course, he's an amazing speaker and author. Well, Michael, and welcome back to the show, and happy Chinese New Year.
Well, ni hao, Will, and Happy New Year. I think it's wonderful to connect with friends and see that everybody's home visiting their families at this time of the year. So it's wonderful to watch even from a distance.
And of course, after the holiday, and everyone will get back together to talk about how much weight and they gained over the holidays. And of course, this is not going to be a good topic for the younger generations. But anyway, let's talk about the first thing, Michael. As we mentioned before, let's talk about some domestic issues. I know there are a lot to be unwrapped. Kim Martin. Now, this rising star officially accepted the position to be the new chairman for the Democratic Party. Now, we know that if we look back what happened recently, especially this 2024 presidential election, people are still talking about who should take the blame. Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, because remember, Democrats lost the big to President Trump. But right now, they need a new face. They need someone new who can really redirect the Democratic Party in order to infuse the hope or even better opportunities, or even gear up for 2028. Now, according to the reliable source, that this is the way how they describe Kim Martin and believe that he is a people person. And also, Kim Martin never believed to rub elbows with billionaires or Hollywood elites. He only believed that he rubbed elbows with working people in union halls, on pocket lines, at civil rights marches, and at protests. So Michael, from your perspective, what do we know or how do we interpret such move from the Democratic Party by electing someone like Kim Martin? Your thoughts?
Well, Ken Martin had the advantage of working in the party and coming up through the party in many ways. There were 8 people running for that position, and I think one of the key things that they felt he can do is to help redirect the Democratic Party. They're having kind of a war council or priorities now of trying to determine, first of all, how they lost the election. There, some honest talk about that. They want to look at their finances. As you may recall, Kamala Harris spent $20 million in the hole getting her race, and didn't leave him with a lot of cash to do anything with. They're still trying to figure out how they're going to absorb those losses. And I think that some of the other manipulations that are going on within the party, they're going to figure out how they can respond and turn these issues in a way that they can regain the working class. That was the big mistake among the Democrats. This has been going on, the leaking of the working class and the favoring of elites has been capturing much of the Democratic Party for years. This goes back, I remember the argument between Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton about changing her focus from Hollywood to the working class blue collar states. She failed to do that. That's what cost her the election. And so that, and then, they were hiding out the Democrats during this past election, giving hours of time. I think of the Joe Rogan interview that went forward and really helped the whole Republican Party move forward. And so they've got to retool and have a different way of looking at it. Think of the California governor, Gavin Newsom. He had ambitions, but he thought, well, I'll just hold back a little bit and run it another time. That time has escaped him. He will not be governor again because of term limits. And then this New York fire has kind of burned up his reputation with the voters for a while. And so Kamala Harris is kind of eyeing the California governorship for herself. And there's polls that support her winning a lot of support in California, but can she keep that momentum going? She has to decide by June, when the primary, before June, in order to enter the primary. So the Democrats are kind of scrambling. They're on a back foot. I looked to see how they were responding to the tariff wars, because it would be very easy for them. And I think that's where you're going to see Ken's role, is to take every one of these bold steps or mistakes that Trump makes, depending on how you view it, and amplify it from the point of view of the working class. That's who they need to target and regain support among the working class. So that's how they're going to leverage this. They've already been arguing about how much these tariffs are going to cost the working class American. That was basically the position they took today. And that's how they're going to line up. I think you're going to see them across talk shows, in the media, and it's all going to be aimed to try and regain the ground they lost, representing the working class and the blue collar worker particularly. And so that's kind of a strategy they have. They've got to get their finances together. They're kind of in tatters in terms of candidates right now. So they've got a lot of work to do. He's going to be one busy fellow.
Michael, now let's talk about, you mentioned about reshaping the Democratic Party. Now, one thing, again, because not only this presidential election in 2024 mattered to the fate of the U.S., and also dramatically changed, even we'll say, the fate of the world, and especially from the Chinese perspective. Now, one thing that I have to share with you on the show is, as soon as that the results came out that Donald Trump successfully became the next president for the U.S., I have to say that got on the social media, almost half of the population on Chinese social media were actually happy, or even as we say, relieved that Donald Trump was able to come back to the White House. But on the other side of the story is people were confused, people were angry, and also I have to say that a lot more people still believe that Democrats, they had good messages and they had good preparation in order to defeat Donald Trump. So again, this 2024 election did not just change or didn't just alone bring shockwaves to the US and also to China and also to the rest of the world. But now with that said, I want to ask the next question. Even though that we're seeing that Donald Trump is in the White House as the sitting US president at this moment, but the Democratic Party are already talking about 2028. I mean, not even talking about the midterm election, it's the 2028. Couple names have been flowing around in order to defeat the next Republican candidate for the future president. For example, we're looking at Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, and also we'll look at the lady called Stacey Abrams. By having someone like Kim Martin to be the chairman, do you think is it too early to talk about 2028 for the Democrats? And also to really buy into or even to persuade the voters for in America, what kind of messages do you think the Democrats they need to reshape in order to allow the voters to believe this is the party for American citizens? What do you say to that?
Well, this is an interesting challenge for the Democrats because they were very much personality driven, but also playing to their strengths, but not broadening their message. This is where the whole idea of skipping Joe Rogan, who is one of the largest influencers in the country, and ceding that to Trump. Without challenge. I think in the last election, there were all kinds of moments where they missed the opportunity to reach out and connect with voters, but particularly with the blue collar working class. That's got to be their focus. I suspect when you see that he releases 3 tariffs at once, tariff changes at once, and more are coming for Europe and others that have been signaled already. I think there's an extra one coming in February for China that has to do with semiconductor chips and some other things. But this release all at once, it's kind of the shock and awe approach to developing politics. And I think the Democrats know enough that they're watching and they're waiting and they're letting him play it out. We know that this is not the end of the conversation with China, with Canada, with Mexico. These are the beginnings. And we often can make the mistake because we're so used to diplomats as politicians or politicians as diplomats. We expect them to put out a calm message and everybody kind of feel all fuzzy and warm about it. He is a business negotiator by style and background. So he started the conversation by getting everybody's attention and saying, we can talk, and then beginning to work that out. And I think this is a negotiated strategy. I think China's leadership are strong, and they can respect someone who comes to the table with strength. And so I think it's going to be a robust and interesting conversation with China. Yes, they need to kind of be alarmed and speak this to the domestic audience. But from a strategic narrative point of view, I think this is not a giant surprise. And they expected something strong from the Trump in terms of all kinds of issues that are on the table in trade. So this is the starting point, not the ending point. I think the Democrats are trying to get their own house together. You know, you mentioned Josh Shapiro, and I thought, I wonder how things might have gone differently for them if Kamala Harris had picked Josh as her running mate, just to name one. I think the candidates they have, in my mind, are non-starters for now. They may, in fact, prove they've got some ability to reach out to the American public and the working class. But right now, I don't think we're going to see personality politics be their primary focus. They're getting slaughtered on the issues of identity and other politics and other kinds of things. I think what we're going to see, they're going to wait back, stand back a little bit, let Trump, get his blast out, and then look. It's Lyndon Johnson said, I quoted this to you before. Lyndon Johnson says, well, when you're up to your hips in alligator, you forget that you started out to drain the swamp. Right now, Trump is draining the swamp, but now he's got alligators coming up. Trade issues, all kinds of issues across the board that he's going to have to deal with. The change to only male, female genders again. This kind of thing is stirring up lots of heat around the country, and they're just waiting to see how this plays out a bit. And then they have to get their financial act together. They have to get their organizational act together. I think that Ken Martin's got his hands full, and I think the time will come when they'll be ready to move to the forefront. But right now, they don't really have the players to start campaigning now. That's kind of engaging the issues, yes, but they have to rebuild a base. They lost significantly in this election, not just by votes, but in terms of influence across the country. They were surprised, just as Hillary Clinton was surprised with the outcome of the election then. And then Biden, of course, has collapsed so much of the party. So this is an interesting time. I don't think we're going to see them responding, showing up on the talk shows, showing up on MSNBC, which, by the way, it was MSNBC who covered Ken Martin's selection as chairman of the DNC. And, MSNBC is one of the lowest rated news operations out there nowadays. And they're trying to put the pieces of the puzzle back together.
Michael, I want to move on to talk about this trade war, or what we called this tariffs war between U.S. and China. Now, we know that how much President Trump enjoyed getting on social media and connect with the voters. Now, in addition to announce that he placed huge amount of tariffs upon Canada, Mexico, and China. And this is something else that he also wrote on social media, and I quote, "We need to protect Americans, and it is my duty as president to ensure the safety of all," and end quote. Now, this is one clear and loud message from President Trump towards China. But meanwhile, make no mistake, China's Ministry of Commerce strongly criticized the decision by President Trump, and also this is how China reacted. China also will take corresponding countermeasure to firmly safeguard its rights and interests, according to the statement. Now, Michael, let me give you the insight from our perspective. This is not something new that we've seen before. This trade between U.S. and China, but right now it's all words. But one thing that I want to keep in mind, and also I want everyone to understand, Trump is a kidding and no kidding personality, So again, it's a wild card. But meanwhile, Chinese government, and also regardless, however the names you think about right now, are also this kidding and no kidding characters. So in other words, Trump is dealing with someone, or Trump is dealing with officials from the other side of the aisle, also don't play by the rules. So from our perspective, when we see that Trump placed more tariffs upon Chinese commodities, or use the words to say, I'm a president, I need to defend our country, get this. Younger generations today in China are very much understandable. This is Donald Trump. Placing American citizens as the priority is understandable. This is the younger generation's reaction. For the older folks, this is not acceptable. So in other words, I believe a survey came out about a week ago. I think according to a domestic survey, the poll shows that people who are more than 65 years old as Chinese nationals and believe it's time for China to disengage with the US. So, in other words, if we can't really play a fair game with the US, don't play the game at all. So, in other words, the older generation believe that China doesn't need the US, period. You know, you think about the revolution period, and you think about all the wars that we fought, and you think about how China stood up against Japan, stood up against all the big powers, and what happened? We won. So right now, again, Michael, we're seeing this dynamic shift from the younger generation to the older generation. So that's why by seeing the news on social media regarding the trade war, it's very, very divided internally. You can't say Trump is a good character, and also you cannot say that US is a bad country. How much would you? I want to know what you say to that.
Well, these kind of trade tariff disruptions are not good for China's economy, which is working to improve and challenging that. There's been lots of projections on what this could mean for China. The U.S. economy, already Ken and others have come out and said it's going to cost consumers anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 a year. So both sides are looking at that this could be a costly thing for their economies and for their citizens. So clearly there needs to be a rapprochement at some point. But the way that negotiation takes place, it's not by everybody starting out with big hugs. These kind of things start out with people laying down what they're going to do. We expect, watching this, that the United States is going to try and put up tariffs against semiconductor chips. China will probably not choose as much on the technical side, but probably last time, if you remember, we've been here before. They dealt with agricultural kinds of embargoes and losses from the United States. They kept commodities from the United States. And Trump and team had to run out and give subsidies to the farmers and others to make up for what the actions China had taken. I actually, looking back over this, in a way, some of this is a bit of a repeat of Trump 1. And this is now Trump 2. I think that we're just seeing the opening actions here in this trade negotiation. Both sides want things different than they are, and so now it's a matter of how can they both come away from this with perhaps even a stronger relationship in terms of trade than they currently have. You can bet that Trump went into it saying, I want to improve things, and China will meet him in saying, and we're going to improve as well. That's how deals come together. And, Trump's the art of the deal. So I'm suggesting that the tactics we're seeing are not a belligerence against China. It's saying, I want to make a better deal with China in some regard. There's a lot of room here for both sides to benefit and to manage this difficulty. But these are real. And it's understandable how the older generation may want China just simply to do something demonstrative, and they may. But because there's a whole lot of ground to do that with. But I think this is headed actually through a rough period of change, in with both sides have an opportunity to come out with something better than they currently have. You don't negotiate with diplomats and get the best deal. And clearly Trump believes in that because that's his approach on several fronts, including China. But you see, he put China in the same sentence with Canada, one of our longest partners. And people can see, okay, Mexico, we got a battle going on over immigration and other kinds of things. But he's got Canada and China in the same basket, if you were, of announcements. That tells you something, because Canada is a partner. So how do you treat your best friends and your adversaries? Yeah, I use that word with parentheses around your adversaries in the same breath. That tells you that there's something constructive coming this is a starting point.
Michael, what about one more question before we move on to the next topic? What about the rhetoric from Trump? I remember last time you and we had the conversation, and I remember you mentioned that you taught a course regarding the narratives or political narratives. That when we listen to Donald Trump, I mean, even before being elected as the president, and also especially after elected as the president, Trump mentions numerous times that he and Chinese leader are good friends, or I may paraphrase that, but somewhere along the line that he showed that he never wanted to start a war with China, or he never wanted to become the adversaries for China. So he emphasized numerous times that U.S. and China can work together, or and Trump and Chinese leader could become friends, regardless either personally or diplomatically. So from your perspective, how much do we believe in that? Because we know that at this moment, like I said before, it's one thing to look at what Trump did. It's something else to listen to what he just said or how he said it. It's a bit confusing for our Chinese nationals to listen to Trump. So I want to know from you as American or as experienced a journalist, how do we understand Trump's this rhetoric, especially going back and forth today?
Well, I would recommend that you, with these questions in mind, that you watch Trump addressing the European Union through the World Economic Forum and Trump's speech at the World Economic Forum. Very similar kinds of things. Positive things. Yeah, they had a BlackRock there who's heavily influential, both in China and the United States and 90 some countries around the world, who asked the first question, by the way, which I thought was interesting. And he took questions as well. And he comes out, lots of praise for lots of people, very positive. We're going to work together. And then the first thing he does is talks about how Europe has been treating them very poorly. And he expects Europe to change things. Europe is really on a back foot economically. They've got some challenges ahead in their own economy, so while they're stunned by his strong language and presentation and his direct criticism, but they're also listening. They're also paying attention. And I think you're going to see Europe, instead of just kind of huffing off into the corner, you're going to see Europe trying to figure out what can we learn here, because we really need to fix our wagon as well. We're growing at, I think the growth rate for Europe is like a 0.3%. So their forecast for growth is terrible. China is going through some of its own changes. China's looking for ways to grow. And I think that you're going to see this is going to happen. Now, of course, this is a very complicated, it's not a single issue approach. But I think what you're going to see is a web of issues coming together. I mean, I honestly don't think that Trump is starting all this because of fentanyl. I mean, I think the fentanyl issue is important with China. The fentanyl issue is important with Canada and Mexico, but I would be surprised if fentanyl was at the top of the list for any of these leaders, including Trump. So he's bringing up some issues that they can talk about on the surface, but I think the issues the conversations they'll really have will be longer term issues, not short term, trying to ask China not to send the chemicals along that help to make fentanyl. That's not really the core of this thing. It may be a surface issue, but I'm saying the conversations that these gentlemen have is based on them all being strong personalities, strong characters with clear objectives. And I think that's where there's a respect. And when we talk about friendship, it's not about pals. It's about strength and respect for each other. And they'll get tough with each other. But I honestly think that that both countries will be better at the other side of it. But right now, it's headlines and craziness, and guys like Ken are kind of running around like trying to find a way to take advantage of this to rebuild his party, which is in pretty bad shape.
Mm.
But I think China will have its own messages, has to have its own separate messages for the different audiences in China, and there are different audiences in China. And
Mm.
so I expect him to say and do things, the China's president say and do things that are uniquely Chinese for the Chinese narrative.
Mm.
And so it's this from my point of view. This makes interesting reading. I said this week. I said my favorite thing to do is to get up in the morning and go to class, and then just be astonished at what happened overnight in the news.
Mm.
So
Well, Michael, we all feel the same way. Well, the last part I want to discuss is talk about as we see that Trump's administration starting to take a better shape, and we've seen the confirmation hearing of Hexeth, and also we've seen the confirmation hearing of Marco Rubio. But recently, another character that brought attention to the news media, who is Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, again, you and I, we had the brief discussion before taping the show that he was a former Democrat voter and also candidate, running to compete with all the for the presidential election back in the days. But right now, that Tulsi Gabbard is getting ready to join Trump administration. And as a matter of fact, that during the campaign trail, that he officially announced that she switched her party from Democrats to Republican. So my last question, Michael, to you is, from your perspective, how do we understand the specific elections of people such as Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, and also Marco Rubio and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and also including Doug Berman? I mean, those names are familiar to the voters. But when we really put them under Donald Trump or to within the Trump administration or 2.0, how do we understand their presence? Because some believe that those people are actually the replacement for Trump's children. So in other words, if Trump could put his children around the administration, again, probably he would not put any of the names that we just mentioned within the administration. So I want to hear your thoughts. What do we understand those people, and how do you think they're able to work together for this new Trump 2.0? Your final thoughts.
well, Ronald Reagan was a revolutionary president within the times he was in, and they called it the Reagan Revolution. And he was going to come in and drain the swamp. He was going to come in and change Washington. And slowly but surely, the alligators came awake. And I remember a time when he literally took a cabinet officer and led them down to the White House press corps room and gave them an order in front of the press. He said, because if I don't give these orders in front of the press where they have to report it, then they're going to go back to their offices and not do anything. And this was Ronald Reagan's frustration with he kind of hit a wall where he couldn't even get his own party to get on board and get some things done. So that's why I think he chose lightning rods, he chose mavericks, he chose disruptors, so that he can cover it. It's like if you have an orchestra, you might be a master at playing each of the instruments, but you can't personally play them all at once. So I think we've seen some sophistication and maturing in his leadership style a bit, in terms of letting these others have some latitude, knowing that they are going to do exactly the kinds of things that his movement is trying to accomplish. It is a revolution of sorts. Whether or not it succeeds is entirely another question. I do think that they are going to capture headlines, and we're going to see all kinds of what looks like chaos taking place. But out of that chaos may come something that is different in the United States. And that's what the voters put them in there to do. I think if you go out and poll voters, you find out that they were really tired of the old stories and they wanted something different. I think they've let the genie out of the bottle, and his name wasn't just Donald Trump; it's all of these other characters. So I think it's going to be a period of significant change on all kinds of fronts. So I don't know if that responds to your question, but I think we're going to see some significant changes. Some of them are going to fail. A lot of some of this stuff is just not going to get off the ground. Uh, and I don't know what things will look like in 2 years. But I think we're going to see a lot of tables overturned. One of the famous stories about a man in history that went around in the temple and he overturned all the money changers and all the temple and created chaos. Well, they went after him for that, and this is that kind of a truth is operating here. He's overturning a lot of tables to have the CIA outed as they have been, and pretty legitimately on issues ranging from Assad to COVID, all kinds of things that are coming forward. A lot of, when they released the background information on JFK's assassination and RFK's assassination and Martin Luther King, these things will have huge reverberations in culture here. So be interesting to see. And for someone like me, I wake up and go, okay, I didn't see this coming.
Well, Michael, I say this to myself, the same thing. Especially right now, it's even more exciting that not only that we pay attention to the traditional media outlets, and also that we pay closer attention to this what we call new media outlets, the social media platforms. And even though that we're seeing the major shift of within some of the tech giants, or within the tech companies, but I think that by seeing President Trump in the White House, the whole world anticipates the uncertainties and also awaits the unknown. At the end of the day, I think it's still very exciting, as you said before, to see what will happen within the first 100 days and even within the first 2 years. And hopefully that the next time we have conversation, I'm pretty sure that will never run off exciting and also surprising news. Well, Michael, again, it's been a great conversation. And again, thank you so much for taking your time. And this is definitely not a boring moment. Now, as we continue to celebrate the Chinese New Year, I'm sure that half the population are going to get back on social media to find out what else President Trump is going to do to China. And half the population is going to find out how China is going to respond. But anyway, so yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah, so thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, I think the traditional media are not where you go to find the answers. They're finding that young people are turning to influencers for more news than they are legacy media. We're seeing organizations like the Post lose, 80, 90% of its subscribers. The game in the information age where you are in telling the news, that whole game has changed dramatically. So it'll be an interesting period of time.
Yeah, and hopefully maybe next time, one day, you and I, we all get invited by Joe Rogan, and that will be the breaking news. Well, thank you, Michael. I really appreciate it.